And so yet another addition into the hidden history of the African American fighting man. Well, this is one that may not have been so hidden, but for whatever reason it may have been forgotten. There were race riots on the USS Kitty Hawk. For those of us who were around back in February 17th, 1972, we remember it very, very well. We may not remember the details, and they're very, very important now, ladies and gentlemen, because you got to understand we were still at war in Vietnam. And Kitty Hawk was on a combat mission, and it had both African Americans and Caucasian seamen aboard. Now, what transpired on the Kitty Hawk, one can argue, was a boiling over of what was happening, really had been happening here in this great country of ours. The Navy was not without its racial problems. And when you're on a confined ship, trust me on this, those problems are magnified. Not a whole lot of places to run. Particularly when you're seeing between 68 and 72. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a significant number of quote-unquote race riots. That combined with 58,000 troops killed in Indonesia, or killed in Vietnam and Cambodia. Well, what happened was fueled by a fight that happened in Subic Bay. About 26 seamen were raced to get back on board. There was a scrap at the officers' club there, or enlisted men's club, pardon me. Used to separate the enlisted men from the officers, the NCO clubs and so forth. And it is not confirmed, but that some of these 26 individuals were involved. Well, as fate would have it, it seems as though some of what happened there at Subic Bay ended up on board. Well, prior to that, there had been some dissension among the seamen, both fleet sailors and Marines on board. And all of this was fueled by the commanding officer. Keep that in mind, underscore commanding officer. His actions seemingly promoted and separated the troops based upon complexion. The XO, the executive officer, was an African American guy. He saw it quite the contrary. The XO stepped in with the African American seaman and sought to try to smooth this thing over, and basically had it there, got an understanding as to what had transpired. However, the commanding officer, on the other hand, felt that he should be heavy-handed about it and instructed the Marines to be heavy-handed. Well, he should never have done that, as Richard Pryor would say. Because the other seamen, African-American seamen, seeing that the other 26 seamen were put upon, decided to make their way throughout the ship in the barracks, attacking whatever Caucasian seamen they could see. And the Caucasian seamen, on the other hand, were retaliating. All of this because the CO told the Marines, wherever you see 3 or more African Americans, you've got to intervene or arrest them. This is a board ship. Can they do it? Yes. The commanding officer is the commander. He can do whatever he deems necessary. But what he saw was necessary fueled the fire. It promoted what transpired thereafter, and it was chaos. One of the Marines seemingly was pulling a firearm. It is not confirmed in testimony that he got it out of his holster, whereby one of the African-American seamen stopped that, and it was on. And it went on like that for several hours throughout the ship. There was some barricading in some of the barracks and the like. How did it turn out? I'll tell you how it turned out. Let's see, let me get the totals here. Oh, okay. 47 men, all but six or 7 of them were Caucasian, were treated and injured for injuries. 3 required medical evac to shore hospitals, while the rest were treated aboard the ship. The remaining, 21 men who were charged with offenses under the Uniform Code of Conduct for the military justice Um, 21 of them requested civilian counsel. They were put ashore at Subic Bay to be later flown to San Diego. The remaining 5 charged were brought to trial aboard the ship during its transits back. Well, long story short, ladies and gentlemen, this was the first time that it became more than evident. Now listen to me closely. It became more than evident that the problem we had in Vietnam was not just the Viet Cong. It was dissension among the ranks. Much of it fueled by the commanding officers. Those in the United States military, both the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Army. I want to do something here that probably has not been done on radio and certainly not on Facebook, but it needs to be done. I was talking to my staff, who are young people, creative, and I had one simple question: what is it that young Americans, particularly African Americans, are not getting about the power of the vote? Now I know some of you are now already turned off. Don't turn off, because I'm gonna demonstrate to you just how the people that will affect your life most are the people who are elected. I'm going to try to do this, but before I do, well, I guess I can't play Sean. I wanted to play Sean King, but I can't do it for the benefit of my Facebook people. After this, at the bottom of the hour, I'll play him. He did an op-ed piece that basically was suggesting that a young man was now being charged there in Charlottesville, a young assistant teacher, who was beaten very badly by neo-Nazis, and now the neo-Nazis were charged by the Charlottesville police, and they opted not to charge this young man, primarily because he had nothing to do with it. He was beaten, he was attacked, and young African-American man. And so Sean King with Black Lives Matter suggested that, they thought all was well, that DeAndre, who is the young man who was attacked, would be treated as the victim and so forth. Well, come to find out, the neo-Nazis went to a magistrate, and the magistrate then allowed the neo-Nazi to file charges against DeAndre. Now you got to understand, there was a neo-Nazi who was beaten, and he was the one who filed charges, but when he was beaten, DeAndre was in the hospital. But yet the obscure laws there in Virginia says that if you go to a magistrate can in fact file charges. A citizen can be allowed to file charges against another citizen if a magistrate signs off on it. And that's what happened, and now DeAndre now is being arrested. But Sean King did something that I find young folks do all the time, and that is he blamed America. I have no problem with that, bro. And then he blamed the system. I have a problem with that too. And no doubt some of you will probably agree with Sean King. Well, hell, every time you turn around, it's America. Even Kaepernick did the same thing. America does blah, blah, blah. America does blah, blah, blah. When the reason for this was not America, that it was in fact a magistrate. That's what it was. It was in fact a magistrate who then in fact allowed the neo-Nazi to file charges without evaluating the evidence before him or her, whichever the case may be. It wasn't America. It was confined to this little place in America and these few people in America. All right. Now, when I hear Sean do that, it simply it for me fuels a certain kind of victimization for African Americans. And I'm look, folks, when you learn what I have learned about the brave freedom fighters and the warriors who resulted in my sitting here and chatting with you, when you learn about that, you realize that the most powerful thing to remember about our history as African Americans and as a country is not the victims. It's those individuals who fought back and won their freedom. And it's the lessons learned as to how they did. So do you have the actual verbiage over there for Sean? Since we can't play it. He comes in, Sean comes in and says, well, you know, the prosecutors chose not to prosecute DeAndre because they knew that. Yeah. Right. Right. Well, yeah, and I'd be doing the same thing. I guess it's still for the sake of Facebook. They can't hear it. So in other words, it was the police knew that DeAndre didn't do it. The magistrate obviously went ahead and filed the charges, and so DeAndre is going to be arrested. Well, so it wasn't America. It was this magistrate. Here is what I want to share, particularly for those of you who feel that you are powerless. You're a victim here in America, and America has this horrible system that we just can't. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do. Or take a knee. Throw my hands up. Don't you? Here's something. Let me tell you what you have here in Virginia and Charlottesville. What you have is a magistrate. That magistrate is subject to you, the voter. No, not directly. You see, the magistrate is appointed by the circuit court judge, the chief circuit court judge. Right? The circuit court judge is, well, he's appointed by and selected by the majority of both houses of the General Assembly, like legislators. And how did you become a legislator? You vote. Each one of those legislators are the ones who will vote for the majority circuit court judge. But there's something else. There's another caveat. How do you become a circuit court judge in Virginia? You're elected. You're not selected. The very people that they can put in jail are the very people who elect them into office. So the magistrate came to be the magistrate because the chief judge who was elected appointed him. So who do you think he would get his directions from? I mean, just saying. Now bear with me. If you're not getting this, maybe you'll get this. If you are an American citizen, an adult, and you're over 18 years old, there's a greater possibility that you, my friend, you, will have someone who's elected impact your life. Oh, you don't think so? Let me just share it with you. Let's just say you go in and you don't pay your rent, and it comes down to eviction. The constable who is elected is going to take those papers and serve you with them. He's elected. The person who you're going to go before, the justice court judge or the lower court judge, is elected. He's going to determine whether or not you're going to be evicted. If by chance you act a fool in the court and don't, or just hold over and don't want to be thrown out of your apartment, the sheriff is elected. He's going to be there. He's going to send his deputies there, and they're going to force you out, lock you out, or do whatever's necessary. If you decide to assault the deputy when he comes there and charges are filed against you, the prosecutor is elected. He is going to determine not only to charge you, he's going to determine to prosecute you. How to? Actually, the judge, he's going to take it, he could very well indict you or go before a judge, and that judge, a circuit court judge or what have you, who's elected, is going to determine what charges to file. Prosecutor who's elected is going to prosecute you. And then, if found guilty, you're going to end up going to a jail where more than likely the warden is selected by a board of supervisors, let's say, who selected the warden, or the sheriff who was elected, or the supervisors who were selected are going to choose the warden in which the jail you're going to be sitting your derriere in. You see? Oh, whoa. let's just say you request a jury trial. Well, I'm not guilty. Well, let's just get a jury of your peers. So they go in and they choose 12 people. Those 12 people are going to sit there and they're going to hear your case. Those 12 people are voters. They're not elected. But they're going to determine your guilt or your innocence. You see how it always comes back? It is not the system that is failing you. It's one part of the system. And that part of the system, I think, particularly with young people, is that you don't vote. You don't even count. You have opted out of the very system that you're criticizing and not realizing you are the problem. You do understand that there's plenty of proof for this. Plenty of proof. Give you a case. The Wade-In case back in the early 1960s in Biloxi, Mississippi, whereby African Americans were not allowed to go on the beach, and so therefore they went out and they protested. But unlike the current protests, it was for a cause, it wasn't because. They created a case. Well, what was the case? The case is that African Americans could go on the beach because it was federal sand pumped up there on that beach. It was federal property. And Dr. Gilbert R. Mason, Dr. Dunn, understood that. So what did they do? They sued. In other words, where you have a protest, there is definitely a target. There is a goal here. First, they went to the elected sheriff. Well, first it went to, I think it was Billy Meadows, who was the current mayor then. And the mayor, who was elected, said nothing about it, did nothing about it. Why? Because African Americans were not allowed to vote. Underscore that. They had no power. There was no influence over the mayor because, after all, they didn't vote. We're talking 1962 here. 62, 60, 62. It actually started in 59. The Wade-In. They weren't being taxed. They were even paying seawall tax, but couldn't go on the seawall. So the mayor said, well, look, this is not my jurisdiction, and besides the fact that the African Americans didn't elect me, and the majority of the Biloxi citizens were Caucasian and didn't want it. So the mayor did nothing. So theoretically, the jurisdiction fell under the supervisors. That was the beach. Right? There was the county supervisors. So they went to the elected officials, county supervisors, who of course were non-responsive as well, because the African Americans didn't vote. They couldn't vote, pardon me. Not didn't. Big difference. They weren't allowed to. Jim Crow. So those supervisors were more responsive to the citizens who elected them. Good, fine, upstanding citizens along the beach, I mean. And others. So they had no other course. Dr. Gilbert R. Mason, Dr. Dunn understood, okay, so what we've got to do is we've got to file suit in federal court. Well, he did. He certainly did do that. Keeping in mind, ladies and gentlemen, this is federal court, and many of the attorneys who were at that point representing Dr. Dunn, Gilbert R. Mason, and others who had gone on the beach. First, they set the case up, right? They had, you know the story of them being forced off and beaten and all that. So that's the case. So it goes before the federal courts. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, Lyndon Baines Johnson was in the White House then. Actually, listen. No, it may have actually been. It may have been Kennedy. Now that I think about it. It wasn't until '68 it was ruled upon, and by that time Kennedy was assassinated. Maybe it was Johnson. Both of them elected, by the way. And of course, this is after the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Now, hang on. The point here is that the power of the vote is what made this happen. The Harrison County was fighting allowing Negroes on the beach. They were all elected. And so therefore African Americans went to the federal court. Federal court ruled in 1968 that, yeah, whoa. This is federal property. You can't tell Negroes they can't come on the beach. That's discrimination, to the chagrin of the Harrison County Board of Supervisors at the time. Well, there's something else that was pretty significant. You want to know what? I'll tell you. What was very significant was, in fact, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed, and by that time, African Americans in Biloxi were registering at a clip. Boy, were they! Both supervisors and the city officials understood that very well, and they began to soften their tenor. They began to understand. Whoa! They began to become more moderate in their views. All of these individuals were Democrats, by the way. You realize conservatism was, all the conservatives were Democrats back in this time. Now they bolted and went to Republicans. So, very shortly thereafter, you found a transition in both the Harrison County supervisors and in the city elected officials. In other words, what I'm suggesting to you is it was as a result of those African Americans voting and becoming a voting power, a voting bloc, changed everything. Not only here, but changed everything throughout the state of Mississippi, which is why Mississippi has more African American elected officials than any other state. It was the power of that vote to change it. That's the methodology. And that's what's missing now, Shaun King. What's missing now. I appreciate him. I mean, good commentary. But you didn't tie the link, just as Kaepernick didn't tie the link. Here's how you get it done. You take more of your people to the polls. You contact, look, hang on. You don't contact the law enforcement officer. You contact his boss and his boss's boss and the boss of that boss, who ultimately is elected. Because whether you know it or not, you more than likely will have a run-in with someone who's elected quicker than you think. So, just for the record, I'm not taking issue with Shaun. I'm not taking issue with Kaepernick. I'm just stating the facts. There's a difference in getting someone told and getting something done. And at this point in time, it's very, very critical in my mind. If it's ever time to have a quote-unquote black voting bloc, end quotes, which, by the way, is not going to be all black, I don't mind telling you. I think more Americans in this great country are moderate in their views. I do, folks. Actually, even in the 1960s, they were more moderate in their views. It was the commander. You see, at that time, ladies and gentlemen, those who lived along the beachside were the commanders. That's where you had the power. That's where you had the money, folks. And they were the ones who wanted to claim their property to the rivers, to the Gulf edge, the water's edge. Noting that the water's edge was not that part of the beach at the time. But be that as it may. But more than anything else, what they didn't want to do is have a bunch of African Americans hanging out in front of their houses. Especially, they just knew that Black Spring Break was coming, bro. I mean, that's what it seems. However, be not misled now. It wasn't just Dr. Johnson. It wasn't just Gilbert Mason. It was that voting bloc. It was the likes of Leroy Corney and James Black going door to door, registering young people as soon as they got out of high school. I remember it very well. If you were not a registered voter and you were a senior in high school and you turned 18, something was wrong with you. You were uncool. You were a part of the problem. You were not a part of the progress. And it was very, very understood. Nothing a young person liked more than being able to flash their voter registration card in the face of that clerk who hated it. It became an ocean to deal with, particularly here in the South, but especially in Biloxi and Gulfport, Mississippi. And even in Jackson particularly. When you start looking at the transition, and actually you can, for you guys who get the clarity, the Jackson Advocate, you really should, by the way. There's always alluding to when that transition happened, when Jackson's last Caucasian mayor left office. And how? It was a voting bloc. That's how it is. You want to know how to get it done? I'm telling you. Now, you can sit there and argue with Rip Daniels. I expected at the bottom of the hour, someone's going to come in and call me with a handkerchief on his head, explaining, well, it's America, Rip, and this is just how it is, and there ain't no sense in doing anything, because if you do anything, all they're going to do is lock you up, and you're going to sit there, and you're going to cry. As if somehow or another, that's what your ancestors did. Couldn't wait to get off that boat. And couldn't wait to attack the person that put them on that boat. Did a good job of it. Had not, they did a good job. I would not be sitting here talking the way I'm talking in Mississippi. So I know firsthand that this works. Shaun King, Kaepernick, and whoever else in Black Lives Matter movement, whatever, need to get that. Need to mobilize. Which brings me to my last portion of this. That's what's missing. The mobilization. You see, whenever there's a movement, it means that you are going somewhere. And I'm not just talking about to the end of the street. Turn around, get a 40 ounce and a doobie, and then go on back home. Why you giving me that look? And I'm not just talking about go to the highway. Where we going? We gonna march. Where you going to march to? Well, let's just go block traffic on the interstate. Oh, that'll show them. All right, so we'll go block traffic on the interstate. Then what we're going to do after that? Well, get a 40 ounce and a doobie. And then see and check on Facebook to see how we look. Man, look, see? I'm all over. I went viral. I never once thought that I would find young people wanting to get a virus. That's what we didn't want. Oh, I'm viral. And it's almost as if somehow or another that's a good thing. You just didn't want to get that, bro. Who wanted to have a virus? I thought to myself, and look, folks, I know what it means now, but I thought to myself, are you kidding me? I'm viral. How bad can that get? What do you have? You go get some penicillin? You need to get something for that. But that's not what it is. Now, it is all about the drama of being perceivably popular. Oh, yeah, he says, viral now, and so therefore, look, that's me right there. Yeah, see, that's me. And so how much you getting for all this fame and fortune? Got a phone call. Media won't talk to me. I'm an activist now. That means I can quit my job and get some people to follow me. Y'all follow me. And where you going? Up here. There's got to be mobilization here, ladies and gentlemen. And the mobilization has to be somewhere. Not just anywhere. There's a direction about this thing. And I'm not just talking about African Americans. I'm talking about America in total. Young people especially. I did like the fact that Barney really did fire up young millennials. And look, I would only hope that in the next election, some candidate would do the same, if it's not Bernie. I mean, there is a motivation to get something done and not just something said. Of course, Barney was doing a lot of talking, to say the least. Getting a lot said, and a lot of it was idealistic in my view. Where you're going is as important as how you get there, and vice versa. How you get there is also as important as where you're going, in my view. And I'm only going by what I learned from those ancestors. Much of what I'm saying now is as a result of example. I didn't create this, by no stretch. It was important. I can remember Miss Grace and people like Dole Moffat and others, and some of you know these people I'm talking about. They would always talk about the vehicle whereby change can happen. You know what they meant, bro? I'll tell you. They're not talking about a car. In some cases, they would utilize the courts. That's the vehicle. That is the method whereby I'm mobilizing. In some cases, the courts, yeah. And the main vehicle, however, was the vote. They would pick out a candidate that they knew would get rid of the candidate that they knew. Maybe even an incumbent that they knew was not performing in the best interest of all the people. So they'll get behind an opponent as a voting bloc and vote him out. That was the main vehicle, but the courts was a vehicle. Legislation was another vehicle. In other words, in some cases, there were some cities that did not want to move, and so therefore the pressure was put on the state senator or the representative of that district. And in some cases, even there would be an appeal, but this is a long shot, to Stennis or Eastland, who were the state senators from Mississippi, federal senators. The reason why I said a long shot was because primarily there was not as great a voting. And of course, at that point, the conservatives, as they have now, had gotten to the point whereby there would be no opponent to Stennis or Eastland. These guys are all powerful. And so what conservatives do is, is that they decide who's going to run and then not allow any opponents or worthy opponents to go against them. That's what's been happening now. There's a way to break that up too, by the way. For those individuals who want to know how the conservatives voted from the Democratic Party, the way they did was that Fannie Lou Hamer and others started to vote in block. They voted because they knew they would be voted out. And in the South, the Republican Party was basically persona non grata. They were not there, so they had an opportunity to get into the Republican Party and rebuild the new Republican Party. The Lee Atwater, Haley Barbour Republican Party, Strom Thurmond, Jesse Helms Republican Party. Not the party of Lincoln, it was the party of Jeff Davis. Well, that sounds strange, doesn't it? No less true. So, there you have it. More than likely, before the day is over, someone who was elected is going to impact your life. I've got a question for you. Why are you allowing them to do that when you have the power to vote them out? Just think about it. We'll be back.